Welcome to Mixed Mattaphors, spreading the good news of books, metal, and video games. So this one is, so I just read a little bit of The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, and I haven't really dug in much to the two books that I have by him. I think I read like a few pages of Mistborn, and I've still read, not more than a few pages or so of around, I don't know. However, a couple pages into the first chapter after whatever comes before it for The Way of Kings. But oh boy, did I just have an enveloping, just it was a great experience. It's like this character sort of sitting in this big room with all these people like dancing in it because they're all drinking and stuff, and like the character and his countrymen or whatever they were sort of seen as like the servants or something. And by the way, I sat there and I thought, wow, this seems like it might be sort of woke propaganda. Like this was, I'm not sure when this was released, but it was released, I think, before. Actually, let me look this up. I think it was released before, like 2010 even, or whatever. And on some level, it's starting with this sort of allusion to servant classes, but not just servant classes, but servant classes that are, seen as or generally appear to be uh, pretty well connected with the races of the servants as well, or, their national origins maybe or something. But in any case, the yeah, it's so I sat back and I was like, wow, like whenever this was published, like I think, let me look this up quick. Okay. The Way of Kings, novel by Brandon Sanderson. Mm, oh, 2010. Okay. Well, I guess that was sort of in the beginning of the heyday of the woke stuff. Close enough. So 2010, Brandon Sanderson published this book that was these, like, it starts with someone in a servant class about to kill a king or something, wearing these white robes, and even the robes are like apparently anachronistic to, the servant's like heritage or something, but the servant is wearing the robes and sort of blending in, and he says like it's easy enough to ignore the servant, and like there are these like drums being played by, I guess, by like other people of this servant class or something. And it said like, normally the elites, and they use the word elites like somewhere in this anyway, or the word elite anyway. And like it said like normally the elites would like essentially not want to be listening to this music scene as associated with the servant classes, and it's like very drum heavy music. And so it sort of has, if you look at this book, if you look at the book critically, but if you sort of analyze it or just sort of step back at, drum heavy music that is seen as like lower class, like that could be seen, that could be representative of rap and stuff, or or representative of like whatever people think of African tribal music, to whatever extent that it is the way that it's presented to us culturally, or that, there is such a thing, who knows, like they might say like, what, jumping around, like playing music, like at some kind of ceremony or something, like you think that we actually do that? Like, who knows, maybe it's just a bunch of people hanging out over there, and you know but then again, I don't know, like music is part of our culture, so why not music being a part of like African culture in Africa? Like, I don't know. But anyway, this music seems analogous to what one might perceive maybe African music as being, or even potentially like hip hop, which is very drum heavy and stuff like that. And it seems, the way it's being presented, it seems like the music is sort of like heightening in intensity, and like everyone's going wild, and the people started to like it after they were like drinking and getting drunk and stuff. And then he says something about like, this and that leave when you reach in sobriety or something, and like this, your standards or your preconcept, I don't know, it's something. In any case, they're drunk and they're listening to the music and they're having a hoot and old time. And now this guy who's been sitting there seemingly for hours or something, I don't know, maybe that's just the way it felt, but like he gets up and he walks across the floor and he's like going past people, and he goes past the brother of the king he's about to kill, who's like slumped on a table, and telling people he doesn't want to go to sleep, which is actually, good for him. Like, it's annoying to me when people are like, do you want to go to sleep? Like, like if you're in like a party situation or something, it's like, no, I'm clearly enjoying myself here, so let me like slump here for a little while longer. That may sound sarcastic, but anyway, he goes past that guy, and like he's, it's just, you're in this scene and it feels like maybe being in a Star Wars movie or something, like in one of those, like a cantina or whatever, and like it's all this crazy stuff going on. But the thing is, it seems interesting because he looked over at the tables where it was the other like servant people or whatever, and it's, forgive me if your sensibilities are offended by how I'm referring to this. If you talk about a character in that kind of situation, and like characters in a story or in a book or whatever in that kind of situation, the wording, it can be difficult to just sort of whiz by every time without it starting to sound like, uh-oh, that sounds offensive, But in any case, if you were reading the book, you might also. Oh, well, yeah. So this music, it seems like there were the other servant class people or whatever sitting, the Pashendi, or the Pashendi or something. The other Pashendi people or whatever their names were, sitting off in their own tables in that the story, and the guy sort of like this. He talks about that before the guy gets up, maybe, but then he also says like essentially the music is like being facilitated by, like, the music is in some way or another coming from the servant class people, and so it seems like perhaps this is a plan, and like this guy's walking around sneakily, he's about to go assassinate a king or something, and it's just like, man, like, this was just a couple pages that I've been describing to you, and it's just it was so engrossing. Like, it felt like I thought about it, and I was like, if I described later what I was doing, it sort of feels like, thinking back on it, like, oh yeah, I spent a little time this morning in this like really hectic nightclub, and it was kind of like a foreboding, ominous atmosphere. That I think is it. I think that is, just, was the book, best written of all. Like, honestly, I think from what I've read so far of Homeland by Robert A. Salvatore, the Drizzt book, I think that book is like sort of substantially more poetically written, or it comes off as substantially more poetically written than the Sanderson stuff does so far. And like, even like, I've been reading Graveyard Shift by Stephen King, taking a little longer than I had scheduled it out to be, a baby, but I've been, you can go check out mattthoughts2.com about that. But I've been reading Graveyard Shift by Stephen King in the collection Night Shift. In that story, like, you know, it's not Stephen King's most snappy writing necessarily, but it's, you know, it's fairly high quality, like Stephen King writing. And like, if I were to rank them, I'd say the poeticness of the three would be Salvatore at the top, King in the middle in this case, and Sanderson at the bottom. But at the same time, like sitting there reading it, or lying there in the tub reading it, it felt like I was like transported to this like incredible scene. And it took a little effort to sort of like, all right, like I'm gonna sit back and I'm gonna let myself like imagine this, or, you know, whatever. Like it took a little effort to get into the reading of it, but it was so incredible once I did. It was, and it was just so incredible. And I really, you know, I give Sanderson credit for that. Now, here's the thing. If I was reading with a similar level of sort of immersion success, or a similar level of success and engagement and stuff, and just generally with like the Drizzt or the Stephen King story, then would I, and I mean short story there by story, Graveyard Shift from the collection Night Shift. And by the way, he's releasing a new short story collection apparently in 2024. I am thrilled. This is like, for all the crap I might talk about Stephen King this way or that way, he releases a new short story collection. That's an event. That's a chance for just endless majesty. So anyway, I mean, oh my goodness. But yeah, if I had been reading with a similar level of immersion, maybe the other two things I was talking about that I said were more poetic, then perhaps, you know, well, maybe something about the way that Sanderson wrote it facilitated that immersion. And you might say, well, of course it was, you know, why wouldn't it have been something about the way he wrote it facilitating the emotion? And it's like, well, because in a certain sense, you could say, like, you know, you don't need that many directions to sort of get immersed in an imaginative world or something. Like, you could do that without directions. So, you know, you could say that almost anything you read, as long as, you know, you could say that almost anything you read could be similarly immersive, no matter how good or bad it is, so-called. It's actually really interesting with the character who's the brother of the king, slumped over, and also like having been telling people he doesn't want to go to sleep. And then this, like, basically the assassin who's about to kill his brother, like, sort of carefully walks past him. And it's like, it seems, I imagine Brandon Sanderson would be like, I didn't think of that, but that said, I don't know if it's not there. Like, it seems like it might be really symbolic, like deeply, of this guy being sort of carried off and lulled off to sleep in this like party situation, and sort of, you know, having partaken in the activities of the party, he's been lulled off to sort of like a sleep or a slump on the table. And people in the party are telling him, like, go to your room. Why don't you just go to your room and go to sleep and stuff? But he's holding out, and you might say, well, what's he holding out for? He's just slumped over on the table. He might as well like go to his room anyway, so that he won't have to move later, maybe, or whatever you want to say about him or about it. And it seems to me that he is maybe on some level, and I mean, generally this might just be like his modus operandi anyway, but in this case it seems potentially symbolic of, on some level, him fighting against what's going on in like the group that he's in, and he's going along with the group enough to maybe be drinking and like be sort of like enjoying the party and stuff like that. Like, he's going along with the group enough to sort of really be brought energetically down by it, to the point where he's slumped over on a table. But he's also fighting the group enough to not be taken back to his room, because he's got to be on watch for the man who's about to walk by and kill his brother. And like, on some like symbolic level, it's like he's fighting and struggling to stay awake so that he can save the day. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like he's been successful to save the day, because the guy walks past him. And I maybe later, if and when I read farther in it, maybe later it'll turn out that he did somehow notice and stop him or something. But it seems like it's going to be just, this guy just walked past him, and whatever else happened that night, he didn't really have much to do with it. But nevertheless, it seems sort of like the Sisyphean struggle of pushing that rock up the hill and saying, I'm going to get this rock up the hill. I'm going to stay awake. I'm not going to, I'm not going to go back up to my room. I'm going to hang out here for a little while longer. And at the right moment, I'm going to roll the rock into place at the top. I'm going to be there to stop this assassin who's about to go kill my brother. And of course, I don't know. That's an interesting thing. You can look into like these situations in books and stuff, and really like delve into some symbolism that you might not have known was there, or is it.